Well, we are still in the middle of summer, and I don't really want to lose my summer. But when this man's college football preview comes out, that signals to all of us that summer is ending and the college football season is near and fall is on the horizon. So again, Mike Asti here, mic drop, and this will be our headline segment of this show, and we'll preview the upcoming season of sorts. I will be joined by the godfather himself of college football, who just recently put out his college football preview, and that is Phil Steele. And we're going to talk some national topics, the college football playoff format, and his thoughts on maybe what some coaches have said at different media days, and then get into some of the teams that I cover throughout the region and throughout the Sports Now network in West Virginia, Pitt, and Penn State. His previews are out. Maybe you already know his thoughts on those schools, but we're going to discuss it here. Nonetheless, again, Mic Drop is made possible by the Believe Network and available everywhere you get your podcasts, including SiriusXM. Phil, thanks for jumping aboard. I know you're a busy man these days, so I'm happy you could make the time. And I guess I'll start asking you how your summer's been. I know you're in a college football mindset and a fall mindset as well.
Yeah, summer is always good for me, Mike. We've got the 7 months of magazine deadline where we do nothing but from the Sunday after Thanksgiving till the first week of June, where it's 80 plus hours a week working on the magazine. Then you've got the football season is 100 plus hours trying to keep track of the 65 games every single week. This is my fun time.
Yeah.
I'm doing six to seven radio shows a day. Writing some miscellaneous articles, but kicking back, maybe working 50, 60 hours a week, just relaxing.
Yeah, just 50, 60. Nothing major there. Getting a vacation at all? Did you get any vacation time or no?
Actually, I did, Mike, for the first time in my life. I went to Europe and
Oh,
went to Europe
wow.
for 2 weeks with my
Okay.
daughter. So that was
That's awesome.
unusual. I've had the magazine for 31 years. I've never taken a 2 week vacation before, but I did that this year.
Well, I'm happy you finally got that 2 week vacation. I'm kind of on the reverse of that, where this was my first summer in a while. I didn't get any vacation at all, but it's because you have a daughter. So I had my second daughter a month ago. She's going to be, well, my first daughter is going to be three in the end of this week, so in a few days, and my second daughter's little over a month old. So this is newborn and a toddler summer as I prepare also for my coverage. So I'm in no way taking a vacation, but nonetheless, we're going to talk some college football here again, middle of June. But you got to get in that mindset. So before we fully get into your thoughts on these teams directly, I do want to ask you, and this has been a hot button topic, and it's going to continue until we get official announcement, but we're likely going to a college football playoff expansion and talk about format changes, etc. Where are you on what you want to see? How many teams you want to see in the CFP? Do you want to go to 16? Do you want to go to more? Do you like the 12? Would you maybe even have rathered we went from 4 to 8 that some have brought up and I've talked about before? And then, regardless of the number of teams, Brett Yormark in particular, he brought up the 5 plus 11. He's a big 5 plus 11 guy. He's even said he wants to go 5 plus 11, even if it does not benefit the Big 12 directly, because that's the most fair way to do it. Where do you stand? You've seen this sport over those 31 years just with the magazine, finding all different ways to crown a champion. And there's movies about this, there's books about this. I've talked about this. You can make an argument that for the first 100 plus years, the champions are kind of all mythical. There really was no factual way to crown one. We now have a playoff, but what would you like to see this playoff look like?
Well, I imagine we'll probably end up going to 16. It seems like the more the merrier. And, once
Yeah.
you open Pandora's box and went from 4 to 12, you're going to go to 16. Eventually, we'll probably go more. The negative on that would be that, and we saw it last year a little bit with Notre Dame. They lost their top defensive lineman, top offensive lineman to
Right.
injury. Becomes a battle of attrition, and maybe it's a healthiest team that ends up winning the championship at the end of the year. Then maybe the best team. That is the case sometimes in the FCS playoffs. In fact, I remember there's a 3 year stretch where twice the third place team in the Colonial Conference was actually in the national title game because they were the healthiest team at the end of the year. So that's a negative about opening up the playoffs to more games would be injuries would take away some of the things. But right now it appears we're headed to 16. And, I agree with Brett Yormark, and I applaud him for standing like that because, instead of saying, hey, I want to have 2 guaranteed spots for the Big 12, he's saying let it be earned on merit, and they're probably the ones that are, in most years, going to have just 1 playoff spot. So I applaud him on that.
And it is interesting he would go in that direction. He would kind of speak out on what he wants for the sport over the conference because we're not used to seeing that. Usually it's a self-fulfilling prophecy for these commissioners over the years, and it makes sense. And he's not a college football guy coming into being a commissioner in a major conference, so maybe that's a different mindset for him. But if you've noticed, he put it out there and all the coaches kind of followed suit. You saw all their press conferences and their round tables and interviews. He says he wants 5+11 regardless of the conference, and now that's the same thing that Mike Gundy, Coach Prime, Rich Rod, Scott Frost, they're all saying that they're now supportive of well. So the soldiers are falling in line with the commissioner, and yeah, it may not always benefit the Big 12, but I guess his thinking is that rather lock in the 2, but have the SEC and Big Ten still be getting 4 and be clearly above you, and it be 2 top conferences, and then you and the ACC kind of battling it out for 3 and 4. That he must have confidence in his schools and his conference. That maybe every now and then they could maybe try to get 3. That they could at least get 2. That obviously there's going to be 1, and then go from there. Again, talking with Phil Steele here, the college football godfather. The preview's out. The magazine's been out for years and is out for this coming season. Mike Asti here with an episode of Mic Drop. Now, I do want to ask you just kind of briefly on, you've, again, as I touched on, you've been around so long and seen champions crowned so many different ways. And this maybe goes into me being a little bit of a historian nerd and kind of going back in, who I think should be a champion and not, and how things have been crowned over the years and, major selectors, etc. Where do you stand on what the fans' mindset should be on who is a champion? And the reason why I ask that is even this past season when Ohio State won, there was a major quote unquote selector that had been around for a long time in the Wolf rankings that maybe casual fans aren't aware of, that actually deemed Oregon the champion and argued that they split the season series and they had a better overall body of work despite losing the playoff, and Ohio State was just their quote unquote tourney champ. And we've even seen UCF years ago, early playoff, they claim a championship. They have it on the press box. Their strength of schedule was barely top 90. They weren't in the playoff, but they claim that they won it. You go way, way back. I mean, Pitt, for example, claims 9, but the NCAA only gives them credit for 5. There are a lot of West Virginia fans that I deal with on an everyday basis think they should claim one from 100 years ago that they do not because they were undefeated. They had the most wins and were undefeated, and nobody else was in that situation that season. Other undefeated teams, but nobody won 10 games that year. How would you like this to be done moving forward? I mean, does any of that annoy you? How do we get rid of that? Or are we just destined to probably always have every few years kind of controversies like that? Because I guess the only thing that exists now is with the AP still doing polls, even though we're getting away from preseason media polls, there is an opportunity that if Notre Dame, for example, would maybe go unscathed throughout the regular season, they're, not a top seed with that particular format, and then they go ahead and don't win the playoff but lose 1 game, they maybe could be claiming something. As an historian like yourself who's been doing it a long time, what are your thoughts on the philosophy of claiming championships now that we have a playoff, and does this get rid of what we had as a mess for so long?
Yeah, I think with the playoff, it pretty much gets rid of any argument. Like with Oregon, for example, if you claim they split the games, if you watch the game in Oregon, Oregon's got the home field edge, barely wins the game. And then you look at the playoff game, Ohio State just destroyed them. So it's not an equal 1-1 there. I don't really buy into that argument. Granted, Ohio State wasn't even the Big Ten champ last year, and they haven't beat Michigan in 4 years, but they were the national champ.
That's part of the Ducks argument.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but when you look at it overall, if you have a tournament like this, then the team that wins the tournament is the national champ at the end of the year.
Yeah, and I kind of like to explain it to people that in the 2007 season in the NFL, the New York Giants won the Super Bowl. The New England Patriots
Right.
could argue that's the best team in their franchise history despite not winning a title. You could argue that's Belichick's best team despite it not being a Super Bowl champion. If they played 10 times, I think we all know the Patriots probably would have won by 20 plus points in 9 of those 10 games. And they did beat them earlier in the regular season, but the Giants won it. The Giants have a ring. Eli Manning's a two-time Super Bowl champion, not a one-time. They get credit for it. And Randy Moss doesn't have a ring, and Brady still goes in interviews talking about how he wishes he could get that one back. That's just the reality of it because there's a playoff, and you got to win the playoff game, and it means more than the quote unquote overall body work thing. We probably can't fix the past despite people trying to, but yeah, moving forward, I'm with you there. I do want to just quickly touch on before we go to the teams as well here, and again, talking with Phil Steele here on Mic Drop about the upcoming college football season, on where you stand moving forward NIL wise, financially speaking now, because talking about the changes you've experienced over your years and over your career, this is now a major difference from when you started. We are not having under the table dark payment and bags of money. This is now directly, and we're even now in rev share where it's going to be directly with the schools. They will be splitting it, of course, but it's not even going to be needing to have Country Road Trusts and those entities. It'll just be out there, and that could be maybe more fair for sure than what we've had the last few years. But there are some coaches, and Deion Sanders actually was one that brought this up, which I thought was a little odd as him being the messenger. But he wants a salary cap. There are some that want the players to be straight employees, and then that could create contracts. And yeah, there's going to be a transfer portal and windows, but if you sign a 2 year deal with me, I'm not going to let you out of the contract. So you're stuck. Where are you on if you think that is going to happen, if we're going to get salary caps, if players are going to be employees and are going to be stuck to contracts, and if that would in any way make this more fair and try to reel this in right now, because you do have star players who are making more money to be in college football than the NFL. You do have star players who are able to kind of dangle their career over coaches. They're free agents twice a year, where even the top NFL or pro player at best is a free agent once a year if they're on a 1 year deal. But if not, they need to swing some power to get out, and teams can say no. In college sports, that's not the case. They have more power than pro athletes. But do you think we get to a salary cap? And would that fix everything if we had contracts and a cap?
Well, we definitely need contracts. There's no doubt about that because you can't have players just jumping like they do nowadays. And with the coaches, there's so much uncertainty. You get a player now, you got to keep the player, and you got to keep players from poaching, and a lot of that. The salary cap rate even things out. Is it enforceable? I mean, once you have the salary cap and the schools are paying them,
Yeah.
what's to prevent the boosters from giving them extra money on the side? So there's still going to be a mess regardless of how it happens. But the ideal thing would be to have a salary cap and contracts.
Do you think we get there from people that you're talking to and the sources that you know and just rumblings of that conversation? If you had to predict?
There has to be an enforceable, like the NCAA has no power. Every time
Right.
they try to enforce something, somebody sues them and they let it go.
Yeah.
There has to be somebody out there that has some power and can enforce some rules.
Do you think we have to go to DC? And I say that all semi joking, but almost serious because Major League Baseball had to go there at one point. We've had leagues have to go there where they have to have congressional hearings. Do you think that if coaches keep bringing this up and maybe players in a way don't want to have that because right now, as I said, they have more freedom than ever before. Ren Baker with West Virginia, he's actually openly said that it'd be worse for players, even though it'd be better for the schools. So maybe they're not stupid and know that they don't maybe want to go in that direction. So if that's the case, do we? Could you foresee having to have hearings and have to go down that road as maybe annoying as that would be for some fans who don't want to see government involved in their sports?
Yeah, it might go that way. You can't think of anything highly productive that comes out of that, but yeah,
Yeah,
it's all stuff that could
yeah.
could very well happen.
Yeah, and a lot of it is a mess, and who knows where we're going to go. I do think we eventually get there. As I said, I find Dion a funny messenger because he did start out his Colorado tenure saying he's going to bring in the Louis and he's going to bring in the high priced talent is basically what he was saying and get rid of half of the people that were in the room, if not more than half, and that's what he did. So it's an interesting messenger, but it's also interesting that a guy that has that mentality that wanted to get the most, he has a player mentality. I'm sure if this was going on when he was at Florida State, that he would have tried to get the most he could, and he would have dangled himself out there as a free agent all the time too. But he now, as a coach, knows that that's not really tenable, and it's annoying him clearly by him bringing it up. So that is very very interesting. Phil Steele here joining me on Mic Drop again, powered by Believe and available everywhere you get your podcasts and on SiriusXM. I do want to flip to the teams that we cover here, or I cover throughout the region, and in particular, want to start with West Virginia. Do cover them directly, and you're not high in the Mountaineers, to say it lightly and put it mildly. Picking them last in the conference, obviously a very influx offseason for West Virginia. A lot of change. What's old is new. Rich Rod is back. They're bringing back the glossy helmets. Pat White, Noah Devine, they're a part of the coaching staff. They're all trying to turn it back and make what was old new and good again, and make West Virginia great again, I guess is their plan. But it took a lot of work to even get here. The roster has been completely overhauled multiple times in the portal. Simply put, why are you so down on the Mountaineers, and how much of that is the roster compared to how much that could be Rich Rod? Because there are some that predict teams to struggle based on not liking the coaching hire, but what has you feel that West Virginia is going to endure a really, really painful season, which would be similar to Rich Rod's first season back in 2001?
Well, first of all, Mike, I've read a lot of the articles, and everybody's saying, "Hey, I'm picking them last, picking them last." Well, everybody else is picking them 14th or 15th, for God's sake. So it's not like I'm picking them. I'm not picking a middle of the road West Virginia team last. I'm picking a team that everybody is seeing as in the bottom of the conference, maybe one spot lower than another guy's picking them, maybe two spots lower. So if they were being picked 7th by other people and I was picking them 16th. Then it's newsworthy. But in this case, everybody's going to pick them 14th, 15th, or 16th in the conference this year. Now, there's two reasons for it. The first one, and going back to what you said, I think Rich Rod's going to do a tremendous job here at West Virginia. He did a phenomenal job at Jacksonville State. In fact, 2 years ago at Jacksonville State, I picked Jacksonville State last in their conference, and they had a fantastic year. So I know Rich Rod's going to get it done. But going over the team with Rich Rod this year, going over the roster, a lot of the positions, when we got to the end of it, it was after spring practice, after the portal, and players are being signed. He's like, "Phil, I haven't even seen these kids yet. I can't tell you anything about them. Phil, I haven't even seen these kids yet. I can't tell you anything about them." They've got over 30 players that did not participate in spring practice coming in the fall as transfers, and now they're going to have to come together as a team on the field. And everybody in the Big 12 is pretty much improved this year. You look at Arizona, second year for Brent Brennan. What was his problem last year? Well, last year he had a whole bunch of transfers, and it was his first year with the program, and it sure as hell took time to get it together. They went 4-8 last year. And, Colorado may be a little bit weaker than last year, but they were 9-4. UCF with Scott Frost is going through much the same thing. They got a lot of transfers. But then the second thing with West Virginia is the schedule. And if you look at the schedule this year, they're hosting Texas Tech. Texas Tech's one of the top teams in the conference. They're hosting TCU. TCU is one of the top teams in the conference. They're hosting Utah. Utah is one of the top teams in the conference. I think they're going to be an underdog in all three of those games. The Colorado game, I rate a toss-up. That means they're going to have to win their road games. Look at the road games, for crying out loud. Kansas, BYU, UCF, Houston, and Arizona State. You tell me where West Virginia is going to be favored in that schedule. That's 9 games they're playing in the Big 12. I think the one game that they've got a chance of being favored is Colorado, but that's saying that Colorado's newcomers don't perform anywhere near what they did last year. So it's number one, not the talent, because I do think there's talent on this West Virginia team, but how quickly they come together as a team. And then the big factor is the schedule. They only have 4 Big 12 home games this year. 3 of them are against the league powers, and that means 5 Big 12 road games this year. They may be an underdog in 8 or 9 of their Big 12 games this year.
Yeah, and that's all fair. And yeah, I mean, the highest anyone is predicting West Virginia is 14th. I haven't really seen anything higher than that. There's not a Big 12 media poll. They don't want to ask us. You did mention that you were wrong on Rich Rod a couple years ago with Jack State. That's part of why that they got rid of the Big 12 media poll. We as conference media have been wrong for several years in a row, even going to West Virginia 2 years ago, 2 seasons ago. They were picked last towards the bottom, and they ended up in fourth and won 9 games. And last year, Arizona State, of course, went from the bottom to winning the conference, and Kurt Zanetti did it at Indiana year one. That's what Rich Rod's been citing. He's very, very confident. He's talking about Big 12
Oh,
title and things
Mike,
like that he needs to
one
accomplish.
one thing
Yeah.
one thing that you just mentioned there, 2 years ago when West Virginia was picked by the media last
Mhm.
in the conference, I didn't have them last in the conference. I had them a lot higher than that.
That's fair.
And that
That's
was one
fair.
of the reasons that I won the magazine contest that year because I had West Virginia higher, and they actually got me 3 or 4 points in the magazine contest because of where they finished.
Well, I'll tell Neil Brown that that happened for you, and yeah, that was the shining light season for him, obviously, and then that didn't work out last season, and here we are with Rich Rod. But yeah, the point of it is though, teams where they're predicted by media, even people like yourself, it doesn't have to be where they end up in stone. Things can turn around and crazy things can happen through a year, but I do think a lot of that is fair, and we will see on how these transfers work. I mean, Rich Rod claims he cut players. Other players say they left. But regardless, what happened, they had players going in and out. And as you mentioned, yeah, a lot of new players from even that were there in spring ball. And I will tell you, Phil, even being media there every day during the spring, he only let us see 11 minutes of practice the whole time. Like he was very close to the vest. He wouldn't give us much information because there was a portal coming up. So I'm not at all shocked that he sat down with you and said I don't have much to tell you and I don't know a lot. And then you're sitting there saying what can I do? Jaheim White's there, but he didn't even participate much in the spring. So it is going to be an incredible crapshoot. We will see. I do know he is basically almost guaranteed that they're not going to do a 2001 thing. I mean, he's throwing a lot more out there. So the tenure may work, but if it's going to be what Phil Steele projects in year one, it might be rough for fans, and we'll see what then the next offseason looks like because he's putting out there that they're going to be better than that. And you did mention the schedule. The only benefit for the Mountaineers is their out of conference schedule's easier than it's been. He's gonna be 1-0 and get one win off the bat where Neil Brown didn't get that with Penn State and the Brawl and Maryland as their week one games in recent years. So now it'll be Robert Morris. He only has the 10 power forward instead of 11. That's all at least maybe going to crawl them to a bowl game, depending on how the conference schedule goes. They at worst they should be 2-1 in the out of conference schedule before Big 12 play, unlike recent years. So we'll see what happens. I do want to get your thoughts now on Pitt, who is another team in our region, of course, the Mountaineers arch rival in the backyard brawl. And what happens in that game could be a big deal in what happens for both of these two team seasons. The Panthers coming off of a wild hot start. They didn't play any ranked teams then, though. They had some injuries, and then they collapsed and lost six straight, lost the bowl, and 7-5 regular season doesn't look like much to celebrate after how bad it was 2 years ago because of the way it ended for the Panthers. What will it take for Pitt to get past the 7-5 year last year and avoid another letdown? Because a lot of Pitt fans are kind of getting in that mindset of Narduzzi's been there a while. They did win that conference title years ago with Pickett, but the Jerkovic year was so bad. Last year was kind of a collapse, and they're so upset about it. And it's almost how did we get excited early in a season because the shoe could just drop again? And they're kind of in a little bit of a question mark roster wise, even though Eli Holstein's back for some positions. How does Pitt avoid that? And what do you think of the Panthers this year? Because their projections have kind of been all over the place from media.
Well, let's keep Eli Holstein healthy for crying out loud. I mean, in the first 7 games of the season with Eli Holstein healthy, they average 41.8 points per game. Then he gets injured, plays very little the second half of the season after having a 17-5 ratio the first 7 games. How about the final 5 games, 0 touchdown passes, 2 interceptions because he was hardly on the field and injured when he did play. They averaged just 19 points per game the last 5 games without him. They were playing Nate Yarnell at quarterback, David Lynch, Julian Duger. So keep Eli Holstein healthy, and you'll have a potent offense, and you'll look great. Defensively, I remember talking to Coach Narduzzi last year. I said, boy, you're losing a lot off that defensive front. He's like, Phil, we're going to be better sack-wise. I'm like, really? I mean, and sure enough, they went from 31 to 41 sacks last year. They're going to be dangerous on the defense again. They've got Desmond Reed back at running back, Eli Holstein, and the offensive line, 3 years ago, they lost their left tackle after 3 games. And 2 years ago, they lost their left tackle after 3 games. Last year, it took them till game 6 till they lost their left tackle. They also had 2 other returning starters combined just 3 games to start last year. So this is, they can keep the offensive line healthy, keep Eli Holstein healthy. I think Pitt's going to be a surprise team this year and improve upon their 7-win total. And really, that was the key last year. 7-0, 41 points per game with Eli Holstein healthy.
Yeah, and then they lost some tough games. The schedule's part of it, but yeah, Eli Holstein wasn't healthy at the end, so that definitely is a legit excuse that Pitt fans can bring up. Would you classify this season as a make or break year for Pat Narduzzi at Pitt? And he's been there a long time. He did win a conference title, but it's been a roller coaster ride in recent years. A lot of coaches don't have a shelf life that expands more than a decade unless you start clipping off more championships. Obviously now college football is changing again, and there are some that don't know if Narduzzi can do it again. And, I believe this will be year 9 for him. Where are you on if this is not what you're saying? If he, say, wins less than 7, could you see this being the end of the line for Narduzzi? And would you sympathize with Pitt fans that maybe are kind of getting sick of the same old story? Or do you think Pitt is best to stay the course regardless? Would this be a make or break year for Narduzzi here in 2025?
Yeah, I think if he has a losing season this year, then he's clearly on the hot seat and might be on his way out. But I don't foresee a losing season this year. I think he's done a great job compiling the team, and I think Pat Narduzzi is going to have a fine year this year.
And if he keeps on moving and has some winning seasons, then he keeps moving up that pantheon of Pitt coaches. It is amazing how long he's been there, and he does have that ACC title to hang his hat on. Not yet a major bowl game victory, but we will see. I mean, he has been a staple there, and he doesn't seemingly want to go anywhere, but he is a polarizing figure. Because even the year they won the ACC crown, people wanted him gone earlier in that season when they lost that group of 5 games. So we will see what happens. I imagine that if he at least gets that 7 wins, he's going to keep on doing this. But there are some Pitt fans that want more than that, and that might not be good enough for them. But yeah, a 3-9 year again, like it was a couple years ago, you'd have to imagine that there is some parting of the ways because they've changed athletic directors. So that's part of this too, that the AD that they're now did not hire him. So they're not married together exactly. Phil, I want to get you out of here with a Penn State question, and started with West Virginia and Pitt, but the team that has the most chance and is really the national contender here in the region, it's the Penn State Nittany Lions. They were in the playoff last year. They finally got in. James Franklin said, when we expand it, we're going to get in. They should have been several times before if it was expanded. They did get in. They had their little run. They're still looking for another Big Ten title. Fans are now saying national championship or bust. A lot is on Drew Aller at QB to maybe even be a Heisman contender, etc. But there has been some changes at Penn State, certainly on the defensive side of the ball. So what impact do you think Knowles' defense brings to the Nittany Lions, especially talking about the defensive line and DBs, because you're high on both of those 2 units?
Yeah, I don't know if Jim Knowles is necessarily going to bring a lot to the defense. I mean, they had a great defense last year. The key for him is keep it a great defense, and I think he's got the talent to do so. They've got Danny Dennis Sutton at the defensive end spot, one of the best defensive ends in the country. Zane Durant, one of the best defensive tackles. Tony Rojas, one of the best linebackers. A.J. Harris, one of the best corners. It's a loaded defense across the board. And, this team reminds me a lot of Michigan and Ohio State the last 2 years. A lot of players turned down the NFL, veterans, senior-laden group. Your seniors, the majority of them are guys that were recruited by James Franklin, have been there. There's a good team atmosphere. Yes, they've hit the portal for some players, but the bulk of this team is Penn State bred. And, Drew Allerbeck at quarterback, Singleton and Allen at running back, and not just those two, but Corey Smith and Quentin Martin behind them, the duo of the future. That's a deep, deep running back board. I rate number 1 in the country. I rate the offensive line number 1 in the country. Yes, they have to play Ohio State and Columbus, but they've been Ohio State some really good games recently. Very close to breaking through. I think this is the year they break through. I've been doing the magazine for 31 years. First year, I'm picking Penn State to win it all.
I was just going to ask you, yeah. So this is the pressure and talking about polarizing and maybe an end of a tenure for Narduzzi if it doesn't work out at Pitt. There are a lot of fans. James Franklin's resume is borderline Hall of Fame. I mean, he's certainly won there and he's won a lot of games there. But there are a lot of Penn State fans, and I hear it all the time locally here, just in the region, that if it's not a national championship at some point, then it's not acceptable because that's the bar, even though it's been a long time for Penn State and way back in the 80s, even for Joe Paterno. And there are even others that say, okay, if you don't get a national title, that you at least got to beat Ohio State or Michigan occasionally. It can't always be the third best team in the conference. And maybe you're taking advantage of a weaker out of conference schedule to build up all these wins. He's very, very polarizing. But if he does what Phil Steele says is going to happen, then all of that goes away. If it's been like the last couple of years, then we're likely into the same death taxes and a good season and a split divide and polarizing effect on what Penn State fans think of James Franklin. You just kind of tipped it and said that you have Penn State winning it all. As we let you go here, can you give our listeners, and maybe if they haven't read the magazine or just haven't followed your coverage, and they definitely should, by the way, you've been doing it so long, for your Heisman pick and any dark horse team or player that you want to mention as well?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Mike. Yeah, for the Heisman this year, I went with Cade Klubnik at Clemson. He's got a tremendous receiving core. Yeah, when you look at 2 years ago, he had a depleted receiving core. Last year, he had an outstanding one. He had a big year. And when you look at Clemson's schedule, they, like Penn State, are a homebred team, not a lot of transfers, but they did add some key ones. I think offensively and defensively, they're loaded. I've got them favored in all 12 games this year. So I think Clemson runs the table, and I think Cade Klubnik's got a great shot at winning the Heisman.
Okay. And is there any dark horse player that maybe casual fans aren't aware of right now that'll become a star if we're talking a year from now, or even a team that, if, say, it's not Penn State, that could do like an SMU last year, like Boise State? We get a darling team or two now in this playoff era that gets in that no one would have projected to be there. Do you see a team like that that could get in the playoff or make some noise that no one's predicting to be a champion?
Yeah, my number one surprise team this year is Oklahoma, coming off a 6-7 season last year. They had no offense. They had zero returning starters on the offensive line. Like Clemson 2 years ago, they're depleted. Their wide receiver core is depleted. They were they were missing their top five wide receivers at one point, and they struggled on offense. This year, they got John Mateer coming in, who could be a surprise Heisman contender at quarterback. They have the Washington State system, a veteran offensive line, veteran receiving core, much upgraded offense, outstanding defense. And I think Oklahoma's got a shot at making the playoff this year.
And it sounds wild, I'm sure, for your younger self to call Oklahoma a surprise dark horse team, but that's what it would be after the last several years. And there's always talent there, so nothing really should be surprising if they finally turn around and finally make a run. That will definitely be very, very interesting. Phil, I appreciate the time for sure. We will see what happens. As you admit, you're not always right every single year. Nobody is. This is all. We're just trying to project things, education wise, and be educated with these projections. We will see, because I know maybe some fans get riled up when they get the Phil Steele projections out there, and maybe he's not favorable to their team. I know West Virginia fans are kind of riled up about it, but hey, you're not playing the game, so we'll see. We'll see what happens on the field.
And Mike, real quick for your listeners, the magazine's 360 pages. It is loaded with 3 to 4 times the amount of information any other magazine. It's like getting 136 media guides rolled into one. You can only get it at Barnes & Noble and Books A Million. Those are the only two brick and mortar places to get it. That's Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, or you can go to philsteele.com. And when you go to philsteele.com and order it, I'm going to charge you a shipping charge. It costs to ship things, but we give you the digital magazine absolutely free, and the digital magazine is updated all the way through September. So Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, or philsteele.com.
Yeah, make sure to get all that out there. I was going to give you that plug too. Yeah, philsteele.com for easy, but Barnes & Noble for a brick and mortar location. Phil, again, I appreciate the time. Enjoy the rest of your summer, and then enjoy the season, and maybe we'll talk to you again on the show here once we actually get underway and can talk about how you did.
All right, a lot of fun talking football with you today, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, have a good day. Phil Steele, the godfather of college football himself. His magazine is out. His projections are out. We are still in the middle of summer, but he knows where he's going to be and what he's thinking now for the upcoming season. And got to admit, he made a lot of fair points. It's hard to dispute anything he said there, and he does have the education behind all of it. And for West Virginia fans, again, Rich Rod's telling him the same thing he told us in media all through spring. And we'll see what he says in the fall. That a lot of it's an unknown. Doesn't want to tip his hand on any, single dark horse player they think is going to emerge. It is going to be a rough Big 12 schedule, even if out of conference is better. Really, the Big 12 is what's important, even though fans are looking at that backyard brawl as a barometer first. So it's fair to say they're going to really struggle. But as I told Phil, I mean, Rich Rod has told me he can't have that 3-8 season. That it's not possible. Like he basically demands it not being the case. So we'll see how far that takes them. But it's fair to think this team isn't going to do anything with so much of an unknown on this roster for sure. As far as Pitt, Narduzzi, West Virginia fans don't want to hear this. A lot of them followed me, of course. Narduzzi is a good coach, and I don't think 2 years ago is indicative of him as a coach. Phil Jerkovich just had such a bad year. He single-handedly lost the backyard brawl, really. Him and Beanie Bishop got it for West Virginia, really. So if you give Narduzzi a legit quarterback like when he won the ACC crown with Kenny Pickett, and the offense does enough, he is a defensive coach. He's a great defensive line coach in particular, and even for linebackers. He's had some rough moments with his defenses over the years, but Narduzzi, for the most part, has led Pitt on much more of success, of a tenure of success than they had with coaches prior to him. And I mean direct, not going back to the 70s, of course, but I'm talking in the 90s and the early 2000s and even the middle 2010s. That's not what Narduzzi's been doing. Narduzzi's been doing more than that. There's reason for Pitt fans to appreciate Narduzzi, even if maybe his overall win percentage is lower than maybe where some would think. I believe it's in the mid 500s, so it's lower than a Hall of Fame bar, by the way, to bring up that they moved it to 595. And I'm not saying Narduzzi's a Hall of Famer, but he's a good coach. He's not going anywhere in terms of his coaching career. I do think somebody else would hire him if he is gone at Pitt. But as I told Phil, if Pitt does not have a successful season, if they would lose the brawl, if they would have a bad year, I am sure Pitt fans would be out on Narduzzi. I am sure they'd bring up the last several years and say that 2021 is so long ago and you had a Heisman candidate in those years and Mark Whipple was there and Addison was there, and that's more of an aberration because you're looking at 3-9 and then the 7-5 off losing six straight, including the bowl game. And so then if you have 3 straight years like that, and he's like such a good coach, that 3 straight years like that is also hard to believe is going to happen. But if that would, then I definitely could see a new athletic director in there saying, "Hey, you're not my guy. Still got the trophy from 2021. Sorry, there's no major bowl game victory because it's been a long time since Pitt has won a major bowl game. Their rival fans bring that up all the time. That despite the conference title, they haven't won a major bowl game in a long time, but and lost the bowl game that year. Granted, Pickett didn't play after the ACC title, but Narduzzi's a damn good coach. He really, really is. People don't want to admit it, but he really, really is. But I'd imagine a losing season or anything, probably under 7 wins. That probably is a bar. Whether they want to put that out there literally any more is hard to say because, again, Clemson looks like a darling of the conference. I highly doubt Pitt wins the ACC or is a playoff team, but I do think Pitt has a better year. And it's hard not to think that right now they're favored in the brawl because the Mountaineers are such an unknown, even though that game is in Morgantown. And that might tell you right there who wins that game, who's going to end up having a special, better year and kind of buck the trend. That's what we've seen over the last few years as well, going into their respective conference schedules. But, Pitt needs to win kind of just as much as West Virginia needs to start becoming a winner as well. Again, there's fan interest there, but they need to keep on winning to get more people at their stadium because, of course, they're in a major city and not at a college town. So it is harder for them. They're not the big show in town. That's the Steelers and always will be the Steelers. And separate from that, this is not year one. This is not where you can kind of give a mulligan if Rich Rod would have a rough year and then go from there. This is the end kind of a tenure for most coaches. Nobody's really around beyond 9, 10, 11 seasons.